This episode is brought to you by Wix. Build a better presence online with your own professional website from Wix. Most of us love thinking we're more intelligent than those around us. Sometimes it's true, and often it's not. Even more often, between two people there's a whole spectrum of different types of intelligence, in one category of which you excel, and in another you're severely lacking. Odds are you've seen friends or family post the results of online IQ tests to Facebook, or taken one yourself, and surprise, surprise, everyone's a genius. One of the flaws with this type of test is that it doesn't measure the whole spectrum of intelligence. For example, you might score very highly on simple logic problems, but the test fails to reveal you're a complete sociopath, lacking even the most basic emotional intelligence. But let's forget about all the reasons IQ tests may or may not be an accurate tool to measure potential. There are plenty of other videos to watch either debunking or asserting their efficacy, depending on your opinion on the subject. That's not what this episode is about. We're going to look at some examples of how IQ sorting is counterproductive and inhumane. Let's start with a claim made in a book called The Bell Curve. The authors draw some conclusions about various races and ethnic groups, but to make it easier to detach yourself from the categories, as you likely fall into one, we're going to use animals as substitutes. In the book, the authors take cows as a sort of standard intelligence. One standard deviation below them is birds, and one standard deviation above them is dogs. Ignoring any criticism that these results were based on the deeply flawed ideas of scientific racism and eugenics, the more important question here is, so what? We'll answer that question shortly. Since the book's release, its most outspoken supporters have been members of this group, and have used it to justify latent mistrust of the other groups or their assuredness of their own superiority. For example, the cows who read books like The Bell Curve are often convinced that there's a secret cabal of dogs that run the world. They feel threatened by the intelligence of the dogs and assume that they must be up to no good, secretly plotting to elevate their status at the expense of the quote normal people. These same cows take the results claiming that they are, on average, more intelligent than birds as a free pass to talk down on an entire race or justify their hatred or xenophobia. Both directions are overwhelmingly negative. Doubtless, the authors didn't intend for their book to be used as this kind of justification for intolerance. They instead hoped the results would influence public policy. As practical as this utilitarian desire may seem, let's consider the implications. If their conclusion was that we should form public policy to benefit the cows because the dogs don't need help and the birds are a lost cause, think of the damage that could cause. The United States was never intended to be a country for the few. It's meant to be a unified, inclusive society of shared hopes and values. If we were to cast aside a significant portion of the population because of some perceived intellectual defect, how are we any better than the genocidal regimes of the past? If admission to decent schools is limited to those assumed to have a higher intelligence, and therefore greater potential, we begin to creep towards an Orwellian society where the quote intellectual elites reap the benefits of their supposed superiority, while a huge portion of the population suffers at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, because they're not worth the time or effort. Because surely their inferior intelligence relegates them to the most menial jobs available, or complete unemployment and homelessness in a mostly automated society. Instead of this cruel utilitarian approach, and assuming that the conclusions in the bell curve are even correct, the more beneficial approach would be to say, so what? Who cares where your supposed intelligence falls in this simple spectrum? Can a human being be reduced to a single number, and should that number necessarily determine one's future? If you took an IQ test, and your best friend took that same IQ test, and the results showed your friend had a significantly lower IQ, would you feel justified in depriving them of the opportunities society affords you as a quote normal person? What if the scenario were flipped? If you and your friend took the same test and you scored low enough to be cast aside by a strictly meritocratic society, would you be okay with that? We need to disabuse ourselves of this idea that a rigid meritocracy would create the best possible future. If you're a proponent of an intellectual meritocracy, consider where you'd like the line drawn between the elites and the unwashed masses. Now, where did you put yourself? Every single person in favor of an intellectual meritocracy would put themselves squarely in the elite category. Like it or not, odds are many of you would not make the cut. Then how would you feel? Suddenly it's unfair, right? Some types of intelligence can't be measured by a simple series of questions. And even if they could, it would be silly to assume that a single number could accurately represent the potential of a human being. Emotional intelligence, creativity, artistic or musical aptitude, social understanding. None of these things can be accurately measured by an IQ test. But more importantly than any of that, we need to remember that the best qualities of our species defy quantification. Kindness, empathy, understanding. The desire to do right by others and have the same done for you. This is what we should focus on. Instead of segregating ourselves into smaller and smaller groups based on arbitrary criteria, we need to work towards a more unified future. A future where each person can excel based on their own talents and abilities. Some people will be less talented than others. Some will be more talented. That's fine. That's the way the world works. But to deny someone basic human decency because you think you're superior, or you don't trust them based on a number, that's not the right way to live. I'm sure this topic will provoke some heated discussions in the comments. That's great, but try to be civil with each other. And if you're here to show off your IQ scores, maybe you're not as intelligent as you think. But hey, it doesn't take a genius to know that a good website will make it much easier to build your presence online. That's why I recommend building your own professional website with Wix. With Wix, you can build a sleek, professional website to showcase your skills, sell products, book gigs, and just about anything else you could want. Wix does all the heavy lifting like hosting, custom domains, email marketing, and more, allowing you to focus on the creative side of things. You have total creative freedom over your websites, allowing for limitless possibilities. And you don't even have to be a web designer. Wix caters to everyone regardless of skill level, whether you're a novice, business owner, or a seasoned website builder. So, if you want to build your very own professional website, visit Wix by following the link below.